I heard you have a few things on your mind.
Yeah, so I linked the thing from that's on the bottom of our article, so I'm not sure if any questions came in as a result of that. But like, I
Yeah,
guess consider it like a special edition version where it's more detail has gone into the Saudi Arabia concert compared to what I briefly touched on in your last interview.
right. Um, let's have a look. I've got a couple. Someone wanted to point out that you spelled Islamophobia wrong a few times.
I did. I apologize.
Um,
It's unfortunate that a lot of the times I'm typing on my phone,
hmm,
and if you make one spelling error a
it
couple of
it
times,
learns it.
then it becomes the default autocorrect setting. So yeah, I'll totally keep to that and acknowledge that I fucked up the spelling. Sorry.
Yes, you have to reflect. Um,
I do.
um, there's one other one that came through.
Mhm.
Explaining the horror to the fans doesn't seem to work. So
Yep.
what next? Would it be crossing the line to remix Heat with audio of someone reading Khashoggi's last words?
Yeah, it's like I think the only way we're going to manage to get someone to care is if it's like you take an instrumental from one of the BTS songs and then dub it with the audio of the guy being murdered, and then suddenly that would make people actually listen to the problem of what's going wrong.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Another question from the same person. Would it be crossing the line to Photoshop Jimin smiling next to this article? And I'll link you the article in the Skype chat.
Mm.
Um,
It's like, is it crossing the line or is it shock value? Because, I just see the caption. I'm like, I'm really hoping there's not a photo of someone actually decapitated in that link. I'm not going to click it for that reason.
I'll click it for you and let you know. Um, give me a sec. I'll just check it out.
Mm.
Um, no, there isn't.
Okay.
That's a still photograph, and there's no other images or videos in it.
Okay. Yeah, it's like, oh, it's just so frustrating. I guess obviously you follow me on Twitter, so you would have seen a lot of the discourse that's been going on in the last 24 hours. And it was like one of the things I did was I went back and I read the last conversation that we had, and there was where I talked about at that time, and one of the comments that I've since screenshotted and posted was basically like, see, this is why everyone hates her, because she goes around and spreads misinformation, and if you actually did your research you would know that it's not government funded. And it's like the person who is the head of the GEA, which is the group organizing this festival that BTS are taking a part of, tweeted in July that he tweeted at BTS and said that he had personally invited them to attend the festival. That's what the concert was for. This is like the head of that organization saying that he personally invited them in his own words on his Twitter page where everyone can go and read it, and everyone is just refusing to acknowledge it. And it's like, it's right there. How do you explain something that you can see with your own eyes to people who are basically deliberately keeping themselves blindfolded? It's
Well,
just the most frustrating thing in the world right now.
yeah. Well, I mean, and obviously that's the whole point of doing it. Is, I mean, obviously the Saudi guys want people to know that they invited them because
Yes,
that's the whole point.
it's endorsing their regime, but the whole argument that Army Twitter is taking is that it's not political at all and they're just going for their fans. And it's like, no, it's not. It's like you've got the guy who runs this tourism organization that is part of the government. He is the kingdom's advisor, and he is tweeting, I'm so glad BTS is coming. I invited them. It's political. It's automatically political because of that. And I don't know how much clearer it can be spelled out.
Oh well, probably not much, but
Yeah.
I think it's a willful, um,
Oh,
you know,
willful ignorance,
willful.
cognitive dissonance, everything that you can
Yeah.
use to.
People don't want to believe it, so they'll find a reason to not believe it. It's
Yeah,
pretty
it's
much all
like,
it is.
and this is the fandom that calls itself woke. And when EXO took a photo with Donald Trump and shook his hand, they were all over that. And it's like, how do you think the people that you have spent years bullying on Twitter, the same way that you claim that they bullied you, etc., but how do you think that those people that you've given hell because they're favorite idols were put into political situations by their governments are going to react when they see BTS now doing something just as bad as you gave them hell for. It's like, you don't even know the mess that you're about to make. But me trying to prevent that from happening is another example of why I'm such a horrible person to have in the fandom.
Well,
yeah.
Well, do you think, I mean, you know, I appreciate your struggle, but do you think it's actually going to work?
No, I don't. So, like, I'm not completely deluded. Basically, my frustration is obviously at the fact that no matter what I do, nothing is going to change. But I feel it's almost like there's an obligation for there to be someone speaking out. And I'm not the only person who is. So, as much as people who are claiming that I'm a pioneer of the BTS Don't Go tag, I actually tried to keep out of it for the first few months it was started. It was started back in July. And I tried to avoid the tag because I know that me being associated with anything in the fandom automatically gives it a bad reputation. So I was hoping that if people would listen to the people who have been making these protests, and these are people from Saudi Arabia who are women who are making burner accounts and getting them published from outside of the country from what I'm seeing on a few of them. So like when it comes to hashtag speak yourself, hashtag end violence, and they're shutting my comments down because, oh, you're a white person, you should be listening, you're trying to speak over Saudis. I'm like, well, why haven't you been listening to the people from Saudi Arabia who've been trying to hashtag speak themselves for the last 2 months? And then when I speak up to try and signal boost their voices because no one's been listening to them and I've got a semi-active follower base, so I try and use that follower base to bring more attention to these people, I'm suddenly given all the credit for this tag and you're erasing all of the people who are genuine protesters. It's just infuriating. It's infuriating, but in like a baffling way. Because like obviously if I say the word infuriating, they're going to be like, ha ha, you're so mad, stay crying, they're having a concert and you can stay mad. It's like they turn human rights abuse into Twitter bans, and it's just, obviously they don't, but they have no conception of how bad this reflects on the fandom and how bad this then reflects on BTS as a group.
Yeah.
Because like when I tweeted about it yesterday, I basically said that when Saudi Arabia is paying for BTS to come to their country and use as government propaganda, they've already got their money's worth for it in the first 2 days since that concert has now been announced, because armies are arguing about how great this country is and how great this concert is and how it's not political. And the biggest things that I'm getting out of it, number one, America's just as bad. America is shit. And I will absolutely agree with the fact that there's a lot of things that need to change in terms of police brutality, especially against minorities, and the healthcare system, gun reform, the way they lock up children in cages. It's just obviously there's a hell of a lot of things that are wrong with America. But to equate that as beheading gay people in public, which is what happens in Saudi Arabia, or you get beheaded for witchcraft, the beheadings, that's not the same thing as what goes on in America. It's not. And to equate them is exactly what Saudi Arabia is wanting people to think, like, hey, we're just as bad as everyone else. We're not the worst country. And it's like, you're still pretty shit, mate. And then the other really huge thing that Saudi Arabia wants the rest of the world to think is that they are the representation of Islam. Islam is a religion of over 1 billion followers, whereas Saudi Arabia is one country and it is one genocidal regime. So to equate the whole religion of Islam to Saudi Arabia is giving them exactly what they want. And as I've linked you to as well, there's a block list going around saying, everyone who thinks that you should be able to enjoy this concert, block all these, keyword, Islamophobes. And that's the biggest immediate shutdown that armies are using to criticize anyone who's speaking up on this concert. They're calling everyone who's talking an Islamophobe. And it's obviously designed to prevent people from speaking up, because you get labeled as something that's bad on woke Twitter, so you deserve to get bullied, you deserve to be ostracized. And it's a bad thing, you know, no one sane really wants to be associated with being a bigot. So they put this bigot tag on people, but no one that I've seen speaking up against the concert has equated Saudi Arabia to Islam. We're not criticizing the Muslim faith. It is all entirely to do with that country's politics. And whilst that country may use Islam as a religion to justify their politics, to say that's a representation of that religion is very dangerous and very unfair to the millions of peaceful followers of that faith who are all around the world. It's very dangerous and it's very bad. And Saudi Arabia has essentially paid a shitload of money to the Korean government and to Big Hit Entertainment. And the benefit of that has now been armies spreading propaganda on their behalf all over Twitter. And it's only the second day that started, and I can just easily see that getting so much worse in the upcoming weeks and months. And so if they're going to be doing that, I feel that there's almost an obligation for sane people in the fandom to come out and speak out against that as well, as much as the concert itself.
Yeah, well, branding someone an Islamophobe is, it's similar to branding someone a racist or a pedophile or whatever. It's regardless of any truth or not in it, it's just a way to sort of rally people on a social network to your side and make other people unappealing. If I wanted people to, not read Jeff Benjamin, for example, probably the best thing I could say is that he was a racist or a pedophile or Islamophobic or homophobic or whatever. So people go searching for those things, and if they can't find them, then they'll create them. Exactly,
and that's what everyone started to create. It's like one of the people I was arguing with yesterday, of course, went off and made another exposed thread about AustralianSana, and one of the things they screenshotted was me quoting one of the tweets from someone who's in Saudi Arabia, and they said, oh, well, what if we don't share photos from the concert? And I said, go ahead, we don't want them anyway. They screenshotted that and put that in their thread and called that Islamophobic. Where in that tweet was anything to do with the religion of Islam? Non-existent. But apparently that's Islamophobic or xenophobic. I'm like, no, mate, I just don't particularly, I don't prioritize photos of Taehyung from one concert that are going to be spread like when there's another concert coming up in a week later anyway that I can get photos from there from. I don't prioritize one day's worth of photos over sacrificing BTS's integrity for what? What's the gain of this? And that's essentially what I'm baffled by in a lot of ways. It's like, what the amount of backlash, the amount of I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the right words to use. It's like the detrimental effect that it will have on their brand for a very, very long time afterwards is not worth any short-term gain that this concert is going to provide for them. Like, yes, the Saudi Arabia probably gave them a fuckload of money for them to come, but think of all the money and endorsements and all the things that they could potentially be about to miss out on from being associated with the Saudi government.
Do you think that'll actually translate over to them in Korea though? I think because obviously there's a lot of money being transferred around behind the scenes, and Big Hit have made a decision. It seems ludicrous that they wouldn't at least be aware that there would be some conflict, but they're also someone I thought had a really interesting point when they were applying to us that Big Hit, they're still a relatively new company, and they've only, BTS is their first successful group, and they might be over-exaggerating how rich they really are, and therefore when something like this comes along and they're being involved in the South Korea Saudi deal or whatever, and they're being paid X amount of dollars, then I think there's a lot of internal pressure on a company level for them to take that up.
Of course, and that's the reality of the world that we live in terms of neoliberal capitalism and the way that politics is often involved in capitalism and stuff like that. It's just a depressing reminder of the world as a whole that we live in, that obviously extends beyond BTS as a group and just as society. stay woke, whatever. Yeah, it's like, how much money is enough to sell your soul for is basically the question that we're asking, and whatever the amount that the Saudi government paid Big Hit for this concert is clearly that answer to their question.
Yes.
Or their answer to that question. It's a weird thing, because for me, BTS's UNICEF stuff has never meant anything, because I've been very critical of the United Nations as a whole. I mean, the fact that America has never been tried in The Hague for violating their ruling against the Iraq invasion, and they still went ahead and did that anyway, and like hundreds of thousands of people have died, and nothing's ever happened to George W. Bush because of that. So for me, America and the United Nations as a whole is a farce. The fact that the Saudi Arabian government was appointed to, or Saudi Arabian representative was appointed to the Women's Rights Commission last year or this year, that's obviously a joke. So it's just all a bunch of figureheads and farce, and nothing ever legitimately comes from anything that goes on there. So when BTS are made a representative, I can obviously see that's just basically them recruiting something popular and trying to make it look meaningful, and trying to basically propaganda and brainwash kids into taking the United Nations seriously. When no.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, what do a bunch of, teenagers in a boy band really, they're not political scientists.
No.
So they're
just going to see United Nations and see prestige. And obviously that's the whole reason that United Nations paid for BTS in the first place. So that's like obviously a whole other debate in itself. But
United Nations and UNICEF is just sort of seen as that sort of stereotypically universally good organisation that you can support to get virtue points going on for for whatever your thing happens to be.
Yeah. But it's like, so because that never had any real value to me as a fan, them losing that reputation doesn't impact me personally. But I know that quite a few people will be upset about that, because I've seen people on my Twitter feed, quoting Namjoon's speech that he made earlier this year and saying, like, how am I meant to listen to this and take this seriously if he then goes off and performs in Saudi Arabia? Which, it's a fair point to raise.
It's a fair point to raise, and I mean, obviously the answer is, well,
you can't.
Probably shouldn't have taken it seriously in the first place, but
you sure as hell can't take it any more seriously now. It's just like a lot of it's basically, to quote a BTS song in itself, it's a house of cards, and it's about to come tumbling down, and this is going to be the flick that knocks it down. A lot of things that people are also bringing up is November 2018, which was last year, when the media was attacking them for using Nazi symbols supposedly in their past, which they kind of did. It was like, one of them was Namjoon's hat, which had the swastika as part of the design, but then they were able to apologize and use cultural relativism and say, oh, we use this logo in Korea everywhere, so we didn't intentionally. And it's true, as someone who did live abroad there for 4 months, I did see that sign quite a lot. And it's not Nazi over there, it's to do with Buddhism. So they were able to plead cultural relativism on this. But it's something that I've noticed, and I think this is what also factored into Big Hit's decision to go ahead with the concert, is they've gotten away with a lot of things that are very controversial throughout their career, and the fandom has obviously caped for them. So back in 2016, Supreme Boy, he wrote a song for Iron, and the song Rock Bottom, from the album Rock Bottom, and the crew that they call themselves is like a group that they hung out with, hip hop, my homies, my crew. And obviously that's me parodying Koreans talking like AAVE, not me trying to speak AAVE myself. But the way they have a whole crew, and they call their crew Rock Bottom. And the song that he wrote for Iron was basically a rape fantasy song, and it was all about like, I'm your master, I'll tie you up, I'll hit you harder, and like the song literally had words about like, I'll rape you in it. And he's one of BTS's long-term composers, so that was, not a fucking smart move, mate. It especially doesn't look good when Iron then later goes on to be convicted of assaulting his girlfriend, now ex-girlfriend for obvious reasons. So the backlash from that was weirdly minimal. Like, there was a section of the fandom that was speaking out against it, but that, of course, got buried because, don't talk about it, because then people are going to talk about that with BTS, and it's bad for their image. So it's like, okay, well, someone clearly doesn't care about women. If you, it's like,
But violence against women in rap music has been a very
Yes.
normalised thing for a very long period of time. So
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah. Well, for
I mean,
BTS, like I was
I think
obviously
it's understood that it's sort of goes against the grain of the boy band image or whatever. But
yeah.
I don't think that. I mean, most people who are into rap music probably would barely bat an eyelid at that, to be honest,
True.
rightly or
True.
wrongly.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like that's just one example of something controversial that happened that, if it happened to any other group, it probably would have been blown up a lot more. But because it's BTS, they had the whole fandom, keeping it hush, keeping it quiet. Oh, just email Big Hit, trust Big Hit. And you know what? He's Supreme Boy is still fucking writing their songs now in 2019. So all that email Big Hit, trust Big Hit clearly doesn't fucking work. So yeah, they had the fandom bury that incident. The next incident, obviously, was the November 2018 one with the Nazi insignia. And like the way that blew up was because they're able to plead cultural relativism because of the Nazi insignia. But the problem that I have, and I think a lot of other people also had, was it started from Bang Shihyuk, the CEO, recruiting someone from Japan to write a song for BTS. I will have to look up the title, but it was meant to be the comeback that they as a Japanese release single. And the person who wrote that single was a far right Japanese, like he was a Japanese man who had very far right beliefs, and that caused backlash within the Korean fandom, who were obviously all aware of who this was, and it caused backlash in the Korean fandom because that's obviously very relative in Korea. If someone is far right Japanese, it basically means they approved of all the awful things that Japan committed against Korea in their history. So they were obviously offended. They eventually petitioned, and the song got scrapped because of that backlash from the fans. So whilst globally Bung's able to plead that, oh, we didn't know it meant that, if you know enough about Korean and Japanese politics, you know that far-right Japan was associated with Nazi Germany. So that's not a good look when the CEO of the company is willingly associating and trying to pay for someone who supports far-right beliefs to write music for his insanely popular group. So that's the second thing that they've kind of gotten away with. As much as there was a bit of backlash November 2018, it blew over very quickly. So you had Supreme Boy's backlash blew over very quickly. Not far-right Japanese songwriter blew over very quickly. They're expecting that blew over very quickly to now apply to BTS going to Saudi Arabia. It's like the more they get away with, the bigger they think that they can get away with in the future. And that's speaking as a company and obviously not BTS. So, yeah, that's something I think is also factoring into this decision process.
Yeah, well, so what do you think will happen? Like the concerts, let's face it, it's probably going to happen.
It's going to happen,
What do you think is actually going to be the effect after it's all done and over?
It's an interesting thing because, like, part of me thinks it could possibly blow up and be very bad, and then another part of me does also think that potentially it could just blow over because BTS, Big Hit, it wouldn't surprise me if they're basically just, they're very much staying silent, because there's been a few things where I've read, like, Big Hit did not reply for comment when asked about why they are attending Saudi Arabia, despite being United Nations ambassadors. And I think why they're being so silent is they can basically blackmail media and say, oh, well, if you ask us about this or if you write about this in a negative light, we will not provide you access with press passes to the biggest boy band in the world for their next upcoming concert or next upcoming comeback or tour or press pass or interview, etc. So they could withhold access from BTS, and because BTS are so profitable to anyone who writes about them, photographs them, interviews them, etc., then it's in the media's own self-interest to not report on this because they want to keep their access rather than actually be credible journalists. So that's the angle I think a lot of people are kind of believing is going to happen as well, that they think that it can blow over because of that. But I know that it will be written about to some extent. I've spoken to a couple of people who are in the media, and it's a general consensus that a lot of people do already know about it and are trying to figure out how to write about it. Because to break the story, it potentially runs the risk of a lawsuit because it's obviously a very controversial topic. So you need to make sure that whatever you're writing about this is very airtight on a professional level. So there's that aspect, but I know that people are in the process of trying to figure out a way to write about it. And once one person starts, it's going to have a bit of a breaking the dam effect, and then everyone's going to dogpile on. So there will be backlash. It is inevitable. And I think that having, say, for example, people such as myself, people who have been involved in the BTS Don't Go tag for much longer than I have, actively speaking against it, trying to explain why it's bad, trying to explain why the fandom is bad and why the fandom bullying people is bad, why the fandom justifying genocide is bad, can at least be something to almost reply to a lot of the backlash with. It's like, yes, this is very bad, but we did also have people in the fandom who do care about the message that BTS was endorsing of ending violence and speaking up against violence. And we did have people following that. So, you know, it's just, I almost want it to be like some form of example that was set out of principle.
I'll tell you what I think about this is that, I mean, I share your opinions in terms of, you know, just the whole moral aspect of, you know, I don't think it's a very good idea, and all that sort of stuff. But I also think that, you know, it's definitely going to happen.
Yep.
I don't think any media is going to really stop it from happening, and I think that I think they'll actually weather the storm of it quite easily. I mean, at least as far as international fans go. And I think the reason why is because when you look at people who are just, if you look at someone who's not into like boy band music or girl band music whatsoever, and you start talking about, and it's like, well, okay, well, why don't you like boy band music? Why don't you like girl band music? And they'll generally come up with things like, well, you know, it's manufactured, it's artificial, they don't write their own songs, you know, blah, 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 blah. So there's pretty much an expectation in the West that that pretty much everything, really from mature people, that pretty much everything that these sort of groups do is going to be fake.
Yeah.
You know, so something like BTS supporting UNICEF and then going on to this Al Baradian concert, which is, you know, ideologically completely polar opposite, would be completely unsurprising to someone like that. They'd be like, well, yeah, of course. I mean, it's fake manufactured music. Of course they're going to do things that make, no ideological sense, because there is no ideology there. They're just there to make money. Yeah. So I think that what people in the fandom who are very passionate about this might not realise, because they're in the fandom, is that the expectations from outside of their fandom are actually really super low.
Yeah. On the bar. The bar is on the floor.
The bar's really on the floor. So, you know, just so then, you know, I don't think there's going to be any huge impact, really. I think most people are just going to throw up their hands and go, pretty much what I expected, you know, and you know, and it's. I mean, personally, for me, it's pretty much. I mean, I didn't think they'd do that much of 100% about face, but when I saw them earlier in the year doing the whole UNICEF thing, I thought, well, gosh, she's a bit of a wank, really, you know. So yeah, and I get how for people who are in the fandom, it's probably quite upsetting, especially if they have the sort of
invested in that message.
Yeah, if they're invested in that message, if they're very much on your side politically, you know, they're obviously going to be very upset. But yeah, it's, you know, that's what I think. I don't think it's going to really amount to much in the grand scheme, and I think that there's probably some that's probably a known thing, and I think a lot of people are just sort of thinking, well, I can collect the money, or I can be seen as a really nice person to a particular group of fans.
Yeah.
And well, I think I'll take the money.
A capitalist company. Yeah, it's sad. It's unfortunately the sad reality. I think the thing that I'm almost it's a weird thing. I think the thing that I'm almost the most annoyed about is just how easily and how quickly the fandom has moved to become a propaganda machine for the Saudi Arabian government within 2 days. It's just like, it's
Well,
baffling.
well, K-pop fandoms are kind of an inbuilt propaganda machine for pretty much whatever. I mean, whatever their faves do, they're gonna, they're already emotionally on board to such an extent that they can't think critically. So,
Yeah,
and it has a potential for really bad things, and this is one of those things.
yeah, I mean, this is almost like a therapy appointment for me to just vent about everything that's frustrating about the situation, because I don't think anything I'm doing here is going to have much of an impact, but, at least I tried.
No, well, I write things up and do things that, have zero impact, but I do it because I believe in it. And so I think that's fine. I don't think someone should, even, when I go to the polling booth on election day, I vote for who I want. They might not get in, and I might know that the party I vote for is going to get 1%, but I'm still going to do it.
Yep.
So I think.
Sorry, that's my phone going off.
Yeah, that's all right. So, I mean, I think, doing things based, you got to sleep at night at the end of the day, don't you? So
yeah. I feel frustrated. I'm like, why did I have to be born with a conscience? Nothing good ever comes from that.
Yeah, there's, on the one hand, you're very passionate about these societal issues and stuff like that, but on the other hand, you sort of, I don't know, have a death wish and sort of don't like people.
It's a very weird, conflicting thing. It's like, I don't even understand it, and I'm the one who has to deal with it. It's like, I hate the human race on so many levels, just with how stupid so many people are. I mean, supporting genocide because a boy band goes to perform in a country is a clear example of that.
If you hate the human race, genocide should be making you happy.
I know. It doesn't add up. It's like, what's not clicking? Ugh.
So just another quick question, which was asked no before you solicited them, which I thought was interesting. Which is, when are you two going to turn this segment into a podcast?
I'm not against the idea, but I have no idea how to do it.
Oh, that's all right. I can handle the technical aspect. I could probably just put this one up as audio rather than type it all out. Save me about 5 hours.
If you wanted.
Cool.
I don't think I've said anything I'd regret going to air. I'd probably just sound like a stuttering mess at a few times.
It's all good. If that ever happens, I can edit the audio. It's fine. I'm an audio engineer, so I can I can do things like that.
Sure.
So people are now gonna, if they're hearing this, if I do decide to do that, they're probably gonna think that I edited all this after the fact to make us both sound much smarter than we really are.
And they're not wrong.
All right. Anything else on your mind?
Nah, that's pretty much just the bane of my existence for today. So at least I've got some outlet. Makes me feel somewhat better.
I'm glad to have assisted with your mental health. That's 2 people's mental health I've assisted with this week.
Ooh, who else without spoiling anything?
Oh, the person who allegedly got bullied by Eric from The Boys did an interview with me, and
did read that.
And that's it's upset a lot of people, but it certainly made her feel better.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing how that people will react to those situations.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, you don't have any evidence, and why are you sharing this stuff?" But to be honest, even in situations where I've argued with people on Stan Twitter and I do have evidence, they won't even look at it anyway. So, it's I remember
you could present evidence in the form of a screenshot of the head of the GEA, who is a member of the kingdom, saying he personally invited BTS, and the people on Twitter will still deny any form of association to the government and the concert. So that shows how much evidence is actually treated in arguments. So
yeah, that's it. They people believe what they want to believe. They honestly they do. So it really doesn't matter what you tell them, and it doesn't matter how I respond to someone saying to me that the interview is wrong or bad, or they're lying, or or it's irresponsible or whatever. And that's why at the end of the interview, I don't add my little 2 cents about what I think or whatever, because it doesn't really matter what I think because people are going to read it and they're going to make up their own mind.
Mm.
Anyway, I'll hopefully feeling better and I'll leave it there.
Cool. Thank you.
No
I'll
worries.
obviously share it on my page and Twitter, etc. when it's finally up. So thank you. And like, you don't have to like rush and type it out as soon as you can because obviously I'm the one who contacted you for it. So whenever you feel ready.
I might investigate doing it as audio, so I'll see how that goes.
Good luck.
Cheers.